Yo, what's going on, everybody? This is Brendan back again with another video, and today I'll be doing a review of the basically brand new Sony A7C Mark II. This video particularly is going to be more of a first impressions video. This camera was announced in early September of 2023. Now it's mid-October, so it shipped late September, I think, for most people, for me as well. And I've had it for a few weeks now, so I've had the opportunity to use it on a couple of professional video projects, as well as taking it out and about around town for some street photography. So yeah, we'll try to keep this review nice and balanced and unbiased, even though I do really like it. So most of the time I've been using this camera, I've been using it with the Sony G Master Mark I 16 to 35 f2.8 lens, not the new Mark II G Master that was announced at the same time that this camera was announced. So I did not buy that lens when I bought this camera. The new lens is marketed as maybe having even faster autofocus and being a little bit lighter weight, I guess, but not really something that was worth double the price, in my opinion, for right now. Maybe in the future, that'll be a good upgrade, but I did want to preface that, so all the video and photos that you see with this lens, keep in mind it's the Mark I, not the Mark II. So the camera that I've been using for the last 3+ years now, for most of my video and photography work, has been the Panasonic S1H, which is the camera that I'm shooting on right now. It's the camera that I've shot on for most of my YouTube videos for the last few years. And I absolutely adore the S1H. I think it's an incredible camera. The picture quality is amazing. I've always raved about how much I love Panasonic's color science for the S1H. The reason that I haven't just decided to keep sticking with this camera, because it still has incredible specs, even though it's a 4 or 5-year-old design at this point, is mainly because it's a really large mirrorless camera. I'll put a little thing on screen here of how much it weighs compared to how much this weighs, but I think it weighs something like 2 to 4 times more than the A7C Mark II does. So it's really nice to be able to get a camera that has basically the same specs, that has the same performance, the same great image quality, but it's just smaller and lighter. So it's like, why wouldn't you upgrade to that? That's basically the reason I got this camera. In addition to wanting something that was a little smaller and lighter, this is a very compact mirrorless camera, especially for being full frame. The other thing is that these new Sony cameras these days have incredible autofocus with their AI face detection autofocus and great contrast autofocus as well. Even with the Mark I lens, not even with the Mark II, but with the Mark I lens, it still has fantastic face detection autofocus. The autofocus is not robotic at all. It doesn't snap, it doesn't search, and it's kind of smooth. It just kind of like, it's a good speed. You can adjust the speed at which the autofocus racks, and yeah, it's pretty incredible. With the AI face detection, you can also basically scan people's faces in and keep them in the memory of the camera, so the camera will remember certain faces and keep those in focus versus other faces that might be, for instance, in the background or something. That's a really, really cool feature. I haven't had a lot of chance to try it out yet, but I'm really excited to try it out in the future. And of course, the Sony, they have incredible low light. And one neat thing about Sony that I think is pretty great in terms of low light capabilities these days, my Panasonic S1H, I was super proud to talk about the dual native ISO that the S1H has, which is 640 and 4000. So either of those two ISOs have the maximum amount of dynamic range and the least amount of noise. But what's weird is you could go from 4000 to 3200, and even though that's a lower ISO, you'd actually get more noise. So really, the only ISOs I would ever live on with my S1H were 640 or 4000. And it just doesn't give you, you need to definitely be using ND filters as well if you need more fine-tuning with the exposure without having to go into changing your aperture. If you're really set on wanting a very specific aperture like f2.8 and you don't want to have to change it for a deeper depth of field to darken the image, but you need to shoot at 4000 ISO, it's hard to balance all those things, so you need to start using ND and stuff. With the Sony, I can basically use any ISO and the noise floor doesn't change. So yeah, between the form factor, the lightweight, the great low light performance, the great autofocus capabilities, this camera has a lot of things that my previous workhorse S1H doesn't have. So it was really great. And those were the main reasons I decided to upgrade on this. A couple of other things I really love about the camera with first impressions are build quality. It has a really nice all-metal body. It has some good heft to it, some good, I don't know, it kind of feels solid even though it's lightweight. It's such a small form factor that your pinky actually hangs off the bottom, but you can get an upgraded kind of a base plate thing that kind of extends it about another half an inch or so. So all it does is to increase the grip. So it's not like a battery grip attachment. It's just a form factor size increase attachment if you have bigger hands, or if you have a larger lens and you want to be able to have a better grip on it, or if you just prefer a larger camera. For me, I'm trying to make this thing as small as possible, and it's lightweight enough that I don't really need the pinky to be supported on anything. So, but I did want to mention that it's very small. I see that as a good thing. You can always make it larger if you wanted to, but you can't make something smaller than it is out of the box. I do have a cage for it, however, and the cage does add extra size in the bottom. So you get your mounting points, you get your extra, you get your cold shoe plate, you get your top handle mounting point, you get all that stuff, and it increases the size a little bit. So that's nice as well. I do have that mostly for when I'm doing video work. When I'm doing still photography work, I take all that off to just make it as portable and lightweight as possible, especially for street photography, for everyday carry kind of a use when I want to put a strap on this and sling it over my shoulder and just carry it around all day. The reason I've been on Panasonic for years, and before that I was on Canon and Red, and just never got into the Sony ecosystem, was mostly for two reasons. Mainly because they have really bad menu systems, notoriously, and notoriously they have the least liked color science amongst industry folks. Talking about Sony, a lot of people don't like the color science. I personally did a lot of tests with Sonys many years ago and found Sony skin tones to be especially bad, specifically the way it handles complexion of the face. So people who have more blemishes on their face, more zits, who tend to be have more of a blushed skin complexion with red cheeks, or if they're just flushed out a lot more, freckles, anything like that, darkness under the eyes, anything, the Sonys tend to enhance it and bring it out more. So if you have a zit on your face, the Sony is going to make that zit more red. And this camera still does that. It's not that it has perfected it completely. It still has a color science that looks like a Sony. However, I have noticed it's not as bad. It's a lot more close to real life colors. The one thing that Sonys do tend to do is they saturate the reds more and the oranges more. They're a lot more saturated. So that's easy enough to just slightly turn down the saturation. I'm talking like a little bit, turn down the saturation curve. In addition, because it's a little bit more magenta than it is green, I will pull the saturation down just a hair, and then also I'll shift the tint of the orange and red hues, just those hues. I'll shift them a little bit away from magenta as well. So I'll shift them a little bit more towards green. And that makes it match my S1H a lot closer. But what I actually found when comparing the S1H and the A7C Mark II side by side, as much as I said that I loved the S1H color science because of how great the skin tones were, actually looking at them side by side, I will admit that the S1H skin tones, because they're so much smoother complexion and a lot more shifted towards the greens versus the magentas, it does wind up making skin tones on the Panasonic look a lot more pale and a lot more sickly, with just a lot less kind of like blood in the skin, it just looks a lot less alive. Whereas I feel like Sony's new color science now is balancing it better, where there is still more reds in the skin tones than in real life. However, it doesn't make the blemishes stand out in in an unattractive way, but it makes people look a little bit more alive, less sickly, less pale, a little bit more tanned, if you will. And I think that's a really great aspect of this color science. So I went into getting this camera thinking I would probably not be super happy with the color science. After comparing it side by side with my previous workhorse camera, I actually am pretty surprised, pretty pleasantly surprised, pretty happy with how this camera handles its colors. So that's just something I wanted to mention. And as far as the menu systems go, the other pleasant surprise is coming from someone who hasn't used a Sony camera in many years. The menu systems used to be really clunky, really confusing. There's just one list of different categories, different tabs on the side, and they all make perfect sense. And when you go in there, you can access exactly what you're looking for. It just makes a lot more sense. It's a lot faster. They have a customizable My menu if you wanted to have all of your most commonly accessible stuff in the very first tab, so that's a very nice feature. A couple of other like small little things to love about operating this camera for me is the adequate number of actual analog, I'll call them analog, dials on the camera that I've been able to map to all of my exposure and white balance settings. So I have the little dial on the front here mapped to aperture. I have the thumb dial on the back here, I guess I'll call that the thumb dial, mapped to my shutter. I have the directional D-pad dial mapped to ISO. And then I have traditionally this dial on top, which is usually your exposure compensation dial, which like I never use exposure compensation. So I've actually have that mapped to my white balance, which is super convenient to be able to adjust white balance without going into any menus. Same thing with ISO, not having to go into the menu to adjust ISO or to press the ISO button to get into a thing, to just scroll that wheel and it changes it, which is really nice. So now, without touching anything on the touch screen, without hitting the menu button, without even really looking at the camera, I can just change my aperture, change my shutter, change my white balance, change my ISO. So that's really nice that all that is mappable, all that is customizable, and there's enough dials to be able to have all four of those things without going into the menus. If you've heard me talk about how I like to operate my cameras before in other videos, that's exactly how I like it. I like it with buttons and dials and not to have to be going into the menu, so I don't have to be fiddling with my camera when I'm on set and I want to be in the moment trying to capture images. So that's a nice little thing about operating this camera. Another great little feature that a lot of cameras have, this isn't specific to Sony, but it's something that I do like that I didn't have with my S1H, is the S&Q mode. So I can flick this dial on top from photo to video to S&Q. S&Q is basically your slow motion and your time-lapse modes. So you can set in the menu systems what you want your slow motion preset to be and what you want your time-lapse preset to be. And you can change the frame rates, you can change the project frame rate even, which is really nice. That's something I could not do with my Panasonic. So yeah, another little feature that when I'm shooting documentaries or shooting corporate videos or shooting events or whatever, you're shooting a lot of like slow motion B-roll and then going from slow motion to B-roll to normal 24 frames, back and forth. It's nice to be able to just flick a switch to S&Q, know that I'm going to be in 60 frames a second, switch it back to video, now I'm in 24. I don't have to go into the menus to change that. It's just a flick of a switch. So I don't want this whole review video to be just positive things, like gushing over this camera. But the one thing that I will say that is definitely a downer for me so far is the low battery life. It's not terrible, it's usable. I can be shooting video on this battery off and on for probably like about 3 hours is what my experience has been so far, before it gets so low that I'm uncomfortable to keep shooting on it and just have to swap the battery. But on my S1H, I was able to get 4 to 5 hours out of my battery life shooting video. I think this is, for the A7C Mark II, I think this is closer to about 3 hours. Now, it is a much smaller battery, so if it was the same size battery as my S1H, I would obviously have the same amount of battery life, but the camera would then be bigger and a little bit heavier. So that's kind of one of the trade-offs that I have to accept to get a smaller and lighter weight camera. Naturally, the battery life won't be quite as good, but you just get a couple of more batteries and you're fine. So not a huge issue, but something I did want to mention. So to wrap up this video, I thought I would switch from shooting on my S1H to actually shooting on the camera I've been talking about. So this is footage with the Sony. But yeah, seeing both of these images side by side, I would love to hear from you guys in the comments which image you prefer. If you like the way the Sony renders the colors, or if you prefer the Panasonic. As far as which one is more accurate to real life, I think it's basically somewhere exactly in the middle. It's just Sony decides to go in one direction and Panasonic decides to go in the opposite direction, and accurate colors are somewhere in the middle. It's just, do you prefer it to be somewhere in the middle, or do you prefer it to be one way or the other? I would love to know what you guys think, especially when it comes to skin tones. Do you prefer the more reddish skin tones that has a little bit more life, or a bit more pale skin tones, but at least the complexion is smooth? I'd love to know what you think. So yeah. Anyway, that is the end of my initial reaction review video of the A7C Mark II. I'll be using this camera a lot for the next few years, so you'll be seeing a lot more footage from it. So if you want to follow along for all my other videos, you'll be getting a lot more test footage and still photo examples as well from this camera. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and if you do have any questions, let me know in the comments, and I will catch you guys in the next one.